how long has it been? 2 weeks? 2 weeks, it feels like 2 centuries. The things that have happened since we were last with you live. Driven out from my memory the immediate history of worrying about Tucker and Putin, which is interesting because 2 weeks ago, this was the biggest news on the internet. And of course, those of you who follow our DCR newsletter know that I've been spending a lot of the last week or so since February 27th, praying for my grandparents' town in the Panhandle. And you have, sort of backstory there on the century plus since 1887 when my mother's hometown was founded, Canadian Texas, which puts me in mind of all sorts of things about that backstory that Putin told us. Is how far back can we go and feel like we're still in the same story? Well, we're taking you back tonight to continue the conversation we had 2 weeks ago, mindful of the fact that the world has continued to change in the last 2 weeks, and now we've had Super Tuesday, and Trump is probably our GOP candidate again, and Biden is our GOP candidate again. GOP. I am so many layers of which story are we in? Well, tonight on the Mosaic Ark, we are continuing our analysis of Tucker Carlson's interview with Vladimir Putin, but this time on the body language and all the stuff that was behind the scenes. Welcome to the Mosaic Ark. Well, I'm tongue-tied. Good grief. How am I going to do an analysis of body language when I can't control my own speaking apparatus, I suppose? I don't know. How are you? It's been an eventful 2 weeks for sure.
Yes. Like I say, you could just talk with your hands a lot the way I saw Putin doing. Which surprised me because he's not Italian, So.
Well, he's actually quite calm. I mean, I'm just sitting on my hands now that I'm aware of it and such, and just we hope tonight, everyone, that what we're recording right now is what you see, because I hope I've got my tech set up so that I don't have two video streams starting to talk in the background of the stream, and that we're actually getting to do the analysis of the men in the room talking that we tried last time and it didn't work. But I kind of feel like that's the sort of, I've got multiple tracks playing in the background right now of how many layers of conversation we are in at any given time in the Mosaic Ark. I mean, it's amazing that we make as much sense as we do, I'd say.
I think we do all right.
I'm
considering.
I want a bigger audience, right? It's like I'm still trying to tap into the stream of the conversations of the things that people are obsessed with, and there's a lot going on right now.
Yeah.
I mean, really, right? So I thought about we promised that we'd do this week after our 2.5 hour, 2 hours and 45 minutes stream last time, and we'd like finish without going on to 5 hours in one go. But the fires I wasn't sure I could actually talk about the fires without bursting into tears, which
Oh,
is a thing, right? And it also it's
yeah.
sort of a, I felt strange about even putting it in the newsletter. I knew we needed to, and I knew I needed to, but it's not my immediate story right now, which is interesting. I mean, I do have cousins that are still in that part of the world, ranching and such. But so much of the story for me was thinking, it's like this was 150 years of history that just went up in flames.
It is your story, though. It's part of your history. It's part of who you are. So it's part of your memories going up in flames.
That, yeah,
right?
and the sort of, it's like if we're worrying about what is America, and when we say make America great again, what does that even mean? This, Canadian Texas was Main Street, USA, right? I mean, literally the Main Street there, which I haven't seen recent pictures of, but it's an old, like late 19th, early 20th century Main Street. It's classic.
Nice, lovely.
Yeah, Midwest Texan Main Street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just immediately thought of the Music Man when you said that. It's like it would have been a perfect picture in Hollywood of here's what a small American town looks like. Here's the Main Street of it.
Yeah, and to have that feeling of, well, and we're thinking about Tucker and his interviewing with Putin, and that Putin did that long backstory of who are we as Russia. And I mean, obviously, one of the things that frustrates me all the time is the degree to which, when we as Americans are talking about even our own story, where it's like, oh, we're a young country. It's like, yeah, but we have more story than most people seem to be able to tell at any given time. I mean, this sort of, they can usually give some version of their family's immigrant story if they're second or third generation. But I mean, older than that, right? Oh yeah, we're what, right? And I know, thanks to my family on both my mother's and my father's side, we know an awful lot about that backstory, and it goes back well further than 2 to 3 generations. It in fact goes back to the Middle Ages.
That's cool. You're lucky you have that. That's awesome.
And it's, I mean, well, Kilt and I have talked about that when we talked about my pirate ancestry and such. This is my Canadian is my mother's family, and that's the pioneer, which obviously has various levels, right? Because my great, I think I've got all the greats in there. My great grandfather, multiple fan out, right? You've got 16 of those or so, right? But one of them was he was the first Presbyterian preacher in the Texas Panhandle, but he actually died soon after they moved down there. So his wife was left to raise by herself her 5 children. Yeah, and let's see. One of those became my great grandmother, and she had 5 children, 4 of whom survived to adulthood, and one of those was my grandfather. And it's like,
yeah.
And you all thought that Putin backstory was difficult to keep track of, right?
Yeah, that backstory had a lot going on. It kind of reminded me of America in this respect, that there were so many people that came from so many different areas that converged into this one little space that's now being fought over
in the Ukraine.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I mean, they came from Scandinavia, and they came from Mongolia, right? And they came from the north and probably the south too. I think the Poles were in it too, he mentioned. So yeah. And the Muslims that tried to also encroach that far in and succeeded in some places. That was yeah. So I mean, yeah, they had a history far more volatile than ours. That territory. I mean, our territories were disputed, but the disputes were pretty short. Even our Civil War was only 5 years long. It's funny. We have the oldest constitution still working in the world, and we're the youngest nation. It's just a strange kind of opposite going on there.
Well, it's only, I mean, it's only because the British keep telling us that, right? It's like, oh, you're so young, and
Whippersnapper.
yeah, the whippersnapper. So I'm reading among, like, we can do sort of previews of things that we need to be talking about over our. We're trying to figure out what our next like plot is in the Mosaic Ark. I was reading Chesterton's What I Saw in America, and I think it would be fun to talk through some of that. But he's doing a lot of nice comparisons between England and the United States in 1922, so 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And one of the things is it's like England and the United States are nothing at all alike. I mean, our language sort of, but
Yeah.
he goes through this list of all of these contrasts. It's like, we're the group that threw off the monarchy. So, and our Constitution, right, as you're saying, is not the English, not written, the English have a not unwritten Constitution. So it's like, they're not the same at all. There's all of these fictions that we've created for ourselves since the First and Second World War in order to ally ourselves with the English, which...
Isn't that interesting? That's true. Yeah. And there was a member of, I don't know who it was, but there was a member of parliament in the 1950s that still sought to unify the American colonies and bring them back under British rule. I can't remember who that was, but that's to your point. We were trying to create this mythology. There were still a lot of people alive back then who said, no, those are our colonies and we need to get them back. Right? And in fact, they did interfere with the Civil War, trying to make that happen. The British did.
This is suggesting to me that we don't know, we have more of our history that's complicated than people tend to like to explain too.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And thinking about it, it's like with Tucker when he sets Putin up, and so we have the clips, and I'm going to play them, and we're going to work through details. We're going to sort of get ourselves back to where we were 2 weeks ago, and thinking about this. Tucker tries by starting with the, like, what happened 2 years ago, and Putin's like, no, I'm going to give you this briefing that's going to give you the fuller conversation that American politics only works if you do it in little bitty 4-year chunks. Because otherwise people start remembering too much. And it's one of the things.
An election cycle.
Yes. Right. Are we ready to have a repeat again? Right. Mm-hmm. But Chesterton in his meditations was saying, trying to figure out what the difference in 1922 there was between the Republicans and the Democrats. And he's saying it doesn't make any sense because there's all sorts of things that ought to go together on one side and then the other that don't. And he says that there's kind of this flavor feeling to each, but there's no logic in it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know why it just flashed into my head right now, but I briefly lived in Boston 20-something years ago, and everybody there was a Democrat, which didn't surprise me because I'd always heard that. What did surprise me was the reason. It was very much like a religion there. There were certain neighborhoods where you were two things. You were a Catholic and you were a Democrat. And I am a Catholic, and I was talking to a coworker once, and we were talking, I can't remember the specifics, just some kind of light banter. And he gets a little puzzled look on his face. He says, well, wait, you're a Democrat, right? I said, no, I'm not. And he was puzzled by it because he didn't understand how you could be a Catholic and not be a Democrat. Because remember, this is Kennedy country.
Right.
And the two go hand in hand. It's like, so it was kind of like a religion to them, or an extension of their religion, of their religious identity. And so maybe that was what Chesterton was seeing. He said why he was puzzled. He said there are things that don't go together that should.
Right.
Right. And things that do go together that shouldn't necessarily. Right. And you don't even need to get into, like you said, it doesn't matter. You don't even need to get into specifics. It's because of this kind of religious fervor with which a lot of Americans approach things like politics.
Well, specifically politics, since we don't have, Chesterton, so he was Catholic, although he converted to Catholicism. So he's Catholic like me, right? But from Anglicanism. And he does say in that, I would have been a Democrat. But then he says, but this doesn't make any, there's all sorts of ways in which at that point in 1922, the Democrats were still sort of with the South more. So that's strange that the Bostonian Catholics are Democrat, but you say it's Kennedy.
Right.
But this, okay, so this is actually all nice setup for thinking about like Putin. Tucker's talking to Putin, and the Americans are desperately watching to figure out which side we're supposed to be on. And
Right.
as you're saying, Putin's trying to say the region is more complicated, has more strands of association and story than you realize. And then
Right.
Americans are just going to watch and say, this does not compute, right? There's no, I can't pick the side. The side
Right,
isn't easy.
which is why they will pick a side and stick with it, because to try to think of it and try to figure out it makes it too complicated for most people to commit the time to do, right? And there's, like you say, there's layers. There's all kinds of layers to probably any society, but we're talking specifically about ours right now.
Right.
That people don't like being socially shunned either. And rhetoric works on people. All you have to do is, point and j'accuse, right? And you'll be terrified and run away and not say anything. Most people will, right? Because there are times when a literal mob will come for you, right?
Right.
This speaking of Boston history, this did happen a lot. In Philadelphia history, and it's happening again in Canada. Catholic churches being attacked and burned down, based on what turned out to be untrue, rumors.
Right.
But this is a repetition of history. It's the time loop again. Is it that time again? Oh, it's Catholic Church burning time again. Okay. Kind of like, let's make America great time again, right? Like that Reagan clip we saw
Right.
from 40 something years ago. And back to the Putin Tucker interviews and his trip over there, like his trip to the grocery store, like his trip to the train station, right? These are all things that keep happening in a loop over and over again, throughout time. They're just certain things that happen. Maybe it's because people can wrap their head around them if they see them over and over again, certain points. I mean, the church burnings are a tool, obviously.
Right.
They're a political tool. But, and also might be a reason why the Catholics skewed Democrat, because a lot of that had to do with a lot of it had to do with the Civil War and the unjust conscription of Irish immigrants right off the boat.
Right.
And that caused riots. But it also had to do with the labor movement. And also it's the same reason a lot of Jewish people are only Democrat, because the Jews and the Italians and the Irish were a very large contingent, much more so than the Italians. In New York, at the time Chesterton was there giving his talk,
Right.
Unions were just becoming a thing there and getting a lot of political power because the politicians said, I can use this, and they still do, right? Especially with things like the teachers' unions. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent
this
now.
is actually, so I mean, it is topical, because the whole, the problem that Chesterton was worried about was the Bolsheviks too, because it's 1922. And, that is the backstory of like whether we're allowed to talk to Putin or not, because he says in the interview, well, we're markets, we have markets now. We belong to you, to your world now, right? We're bourgeois. Does he say that word? I can't remember. But, it's saying the Communist Party is no longer the controlling party in Russia. So why didn't you embrace us, right? After all that time, which was, supposedly couldn't because we were communist. All of that is topical for Chesterton. But so that's interesting, because Chesterton, of course, is looking at all of this, saying there's a third way. His way is the distributist, which is a terrible term. Like, you really need a better term for your party so that it has like some like mythological distributist means nothing, right? It's like, distribute what, right?
It means I'm gonna take your stuff and distribute it to somebody else.
Well, but no, because he's not communist, right?
I know, but that's what I think of when I hear that.
Yes.
We're going to redistribute, right? That's when I hear distributism, because some people still use it. I hear redistribute. Somebody wants to redistribute my stuff.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. I don't know if that's what it means at all, because I don't know enough about it.
See, it's a bad term, so it confuses people before
Right,
you
exactly.
just like, no, that
I'm not gonna look at that. Sounds bad. I'm not gonna look at
Right.
that.
Well, so the option was in 1922, the option was capitalist or communist. I mean, or Bolshevik, right? They didn't say communist necessarily; they said
Right.
Bolshevik. And distributist is neither, right? It's interesting how in American politics we never actually can get a third option because of the way the first past the post voting works. You know, it's like you're only going to end up with one, two options ever because of the way the
Yeah.
the voting works.
It's been 200. It's been 200 years since we had something other than a Republican or a Democrat party, major party in Congress. I think you've had just a stray independent every once in a while. I think there might have even been a Green Party
Right.
person in Congress, but they don't do second terms because they're not effective, because they have to vote together in a block.
Right, but it's because of the way, yay after Super Tuesday, right? It's because of the way the vote counting works. So it just always ends up a binary. It doesn't matter, and that's why it's like it doesn't really matter whether they're called Republican or Democrat. You're always just going to end up with two of them battling it out.
Right.
And
Right. Or not, or pretending to.
The Chesterton is he's the robber baron capitalists are the baddies, but the communists, the Bolsheviks, are also the baddies. And yet Chesterton, I mean, he's giving me an appreciation in a proper sense of, like you're saying, the importance of the Irish, obviously. And I've been meditating on this too, the importance of the labor unions standing up against the capitalist, which has sent me off on this whole other thread of meditation about how the landlords, the capitalist, industrial lords, in fact, steal all the women and send them into the factories. And then you end up, the men are, it's like you can see labor unions are, properly speaking, the working class men trying to get their women back. That's my new theory.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And another way to look at this is the industrialists sent the men to war and then they sent the women to the factories.
That too.
So they basically just enslaved both of them.
Yes. Oh, well, I mean, the thing is, the women are ending up in the factories long before. I mean, actually, you could say that in the French Revolution too, right? The women are in the textile factories, which and the men are being turned into conscript army as they were under Napoleon or under the Revolution, right? And then Napoleon has this conscript army. So again, it's been going on for longer than just the 100 years, but it's the thing that we're deeply embedded in. So my new theory is, how's it? Feminism is in fact the response to the Industrial Revolution, because it's the women being taken out of the home and being put in the factories by the capitalist lords. And then the labor unions are the men trying to get the women back, but it completely backfires and fails. And they all end up in the war. I hadn't thought of that part. Oh, well, you're not moving again. You got to try. You got to. No, you need to come back in, and because you frozen. Okay. I don't see you moving right now. You're frozen. Okay. I mean, well, now you've gone blank. I don't. You're not moving. Ah,
Here I am.
there you are. Okay.
28 seconds this time.
It feels longer. Okay. So the thing is, all of this is actually topical to our problem, which I think we should move into the deep analysis now, is with, in fact, the men talking, right? And that has, I'm still too fixed on, this is Barbie, but from the other direction, right? Thinking about the hierarchy of the men and the way the men behave, and what because the other thing that happened around 1922 is the women get the right to vote, right? So that changes all of our political activities, because now the politicians, isn't it Harding had just become president in 1922, and isn't it famously that he's elected because he's pretty?
Oh, I don't remember that. No, I never heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah, to look it up. That I think Harding. Now I'm going to look it up.
Oh, or was that just a joke about all the women are voting for Harding because he's better looking?
Yes, that's it, right?
So, but it wasn't necessarily true.
Who knows?
And well, I mean, in Kennedy's case, it was true because this was the first televised debate between he and Nixon. That's very famous. How they looked, since we're talking about two men on camera today, right? So yeah, Nixon looked like shadowy, he had bad lighting, and Kennedy just looked young and fresh, and actually probably had some pretty good advice on how to look, and maybe there was a little bit of shenanigans going on with the people who were actually setting up the studio too.
Oh, to make one look better than the other.
Yeah, because Nixon famously looked like shadowed and hooded, and people thought he looked like, right? But yeah, I don't know if that's true, but it's an interesting theory. I just popped into my head.
Well, so it does. I mean, this is useful for us. Because you're saying, why do people respond how they do to the figures they're seeing on camera? And I was thinking at post Super Tuesday and Trump winning all the delegates yesterday. We are back to a rerun of 2016 where he's not in office, so he's running, right? So he's coming, and I was looking at my blog post from then when many of my friends were very upset with me for thinking I would vote against Hillary Clinton, right? And I
against, right?
Yeah, and I did this
like a hex.
Yeah, I did this post with it was a meme of Gilderoy Lockhart and the woman character Umbridge, right? The Harry Potter characters, and it's like, they're both wizards, and they're both
That's perfect. Yeah, Umbridge. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's perfect.
Right, and I can't remember the caption, something like our current political situation or something. And I posted on Facebook. I wouldn't post anything like that on Facebook anymore. Facebook is so tame. That this is our current political situation, and people were just like, how dare you? He's evil. She's not. How can you possibly?
Irony. They took umbrage.
They took umbrage at my Umbridge and Gilderoy meme.
Gilderoy Lockhart.
And I can feel it, like it's the male versus female again, right? Whereas I think Biden is definitely the female character in this whole situation, right? There's no way that he's playing a masculine role.
His State Department is probably women, at least until before today when Newland finally resigned.
Right.
But that man versus woman would have worked on me when I was a teenager and young and stupid.
But why? Why would that work? Why would you vote for a woman over a man? Just because? I mean,
and when I was because she was a woman, and when I was feminist light, nothing like what you would see today. I thought, yes, it'd be great to have a woman president until I was in my early 20s and I saw the national women signing people up to vote, but then they made a public pronouncement. I remember this really pretty clearly. It was 1991 or two, and they made a very public statement that they would not endorse any pro-life candidate who was a woman. I was like, wait a minute, I thought this was the National Organization for Women. Mm-hmm. I thought you just wanted to get women into office, but no, they didn't. They had a political agenda, and I'm like, well, done with that. Done with them. They just, they showed their hand pretty clearly there that it wasn't about women. It was about using women to push particular ideologies. So that's why I would have done it, because the propaganda worked on me. And that's why I stopped doing that, because they showed it couldn't work on me anymore.
So, okay, let's explore this a little bit, because one of the things that happened with we did this last week with the Putin pictures and stuff, right? That he's all masculine and riding bears and and that has that, you know, that's typically one of the things that the scaremongering on this side of the planet tends to use. It's like, oh, you know, he's this man, right? As if that's the problem.
Yeah. As if that's a bad thing.
Right.
Yeah. And half the women are like, what's the problem? Which is their propaganda problem, right? They can't make enough women hate men, right? They couldn't make me hate men when I was young, and enough to like completely ignore all reason.
Right.
And ignore what they were doing. So, but they're constantly trying to do that because it is a propaganda battle.
Right. So this is okay. So Mel is saying, bingo, military industrial complex, slave waged women. Yes. Right. And so I'd say there's a hanging they in the background here. Who's they? Right. And
yeah.
Well, and there's, you know, there's a vast hanging they in the background of, you know, did they let Tucker go to Moscow? I guess he's back. There was, you know, rumor last week that he was going to be arrested for, you know, talking to the enemy. I guess he didn't get arrested.
Oh, he's back in the U.S.
He is back in the U.S., right? And he
I think
hasn't been arrested yet.
I mean, I think
his hair got longer. He clearly hasn't had a haircut in 2 weeks. I don't know. His hair looks a bit fluffier in the current videos.
Do you approve
of his fluffier hair?
Of the long hair.
It's in that, but it's in that in between phase where it's not like cool and you know,
that's
Aragorn
just,
yet. Yeah, it's just untrimmed. Okay, so we're supposed to be afraid of Putin because he's going to be all masculine and military, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's well, not even just masculine and military, because there's plenty of people. Miley, with his chest full of unearned medals compared to Eisenhower. I don't know if you've seen that. He was all like, here's Eisenhower, the guy who won the Second World War, with like, I don't know, thin bar right here, and then you've got Miley with like an entire, you know, placard of some kind of bars on his uniform signifying accomplishments. It's like, what did you accomplish, right? So here's a guy LARPing as somebody strong, and you're supposed to like him because he works in the Biden administration. Now here's a guy who is strong in Russia, but you're supposed to hate him because people in the Biden administration hate him. And so if you don't support the king, you're guilty of treason. That's what it seems like. It's more like a kingdom and a dictatorship kind of mentality, or that they're trying to make the American people think that's what we have here. It's Dark Brandon all over again, which they're now trying to pass off as a joke. But no, they were serious.
Well, Chesterton actually says we have a king. He has a whole chapter in this book on how the British have a king who simply presides, right? Who has no power. Again, 1922, right? So we have a president who allegedly, you know, is presiding, but he's not, right? We have a president who rules, although not Biden.
Right.
But and the British actually have a king who doesn't, right? He just does like ceremonial functions.
Yeah.
And we actually have the king, although, you know, we elect him.
And so he says, so Chesterton was saying that our president has no real power.
No, he's saying our president actually has more power than the king.
Oh, I see.
That our president actually is a king, and their king is actually a presider.
It's an interesting observation. Of course, all of his observations are fascinating. He's a really easy guy to read, fun. Yes, I suppose the way our system was set up, with the checks and balances, that yes, the commander in chief is supposed to have checks on him, supposed to have balances on his power, but he does have power, and that's originally what the king was supposed to be after the Magna Carta, I think, right? Directly after it, which we have a copy in our National Archives on display, but. Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, in fact, Parliament did a better job of you know, defanging the king.
Well, they defanged him too much, so now he's just a figurehead.
But you know, he's
just a figurehead now.
Even as George III, he was at Parliament's mercy to a certain extent. And certainly when he was mad, when George III was mad, as we know from Bridgerton, Parliament carries on, right? So,
yeah,
which is topical now. It's like, who's carrying on while Biden is sometimes sort of able to speak better than I did at the beginning of this video.
Oh, I don't think so. Not on his best day. No, it's got to be the administrative state doing it. These are people who are senior executive service in the civil service. Yeah. That's it. They shouldn't be doing it, but they are, because obviously he can barely talk, and I can't believe. Well, I know the opinion of many in Washington, D.C. is not very high of their fellow citizens. Not very about our intelligence is not very high. Surely they can't keep telling themselves that everyone believes Biden is completely sound, or even a little bit sound. They can't believe this themselves, that we actually believe this, and yet they keep acting as if they do, which just is angering me more and more.
Yeah.
Every day. There's insulting my intelligence, and then there's urinating on my head and telling me it's raining, which is what they're doing at this point.
Well, this simply proves that he is actually king, because the British had kings. It's a great royal tradition of having your king go mad and everybody pretending he's not.
Well, because he could lop off your head. Well, I guess in his case, he just throws you in an oubliette and
no. It's so Parliament gets its power. Parliament develops its power, particularly under Henry VI in the 15th century, and he does go straight out mad. And he'd been his. How did this play out? He was descended. Well, it doesn't matter. The French king and the English king in the 15th century, they both go mad. And the court has to deal with a mad monarch, right? They have to somehow keep functioning, and they'll go through the sort of ceremonial and pretend, but he's not giving any orders, right? It's like, it's not that he's mad and he'll lop off your head. It's mad, and then the courtiers all like, cluster around and carry on the pretense. That's what we're seeing. And
well, we're seeing something slightly different. They actually picked a madman so that they could do the job and have him as figurehead, whereas a king would have been born into it, and they're just trying to deal with the fallout while still maintaining, a semblance of dignity for the office.
Right.
That's out the window here. No, this was a blatant grab for power.
Well, to be fair to the blatant grab for power. Okay, one of the things that happens in the late Middle Ages around this problem of the king going mad is the idea of the distinction between the person and the office, which is memorialized in a great book of medieval studies by Ernst Kantorowicz called "The King's Two Bodies," and the idea is that there was the private person, the body, the like physical human being, right, and then there was the body that is the sort of mystical entity of the kingship, right? And those, the king has both of those. We can see that it's like kind of, I think, they're using the presidency as the mystical office. And then there's, someone who is the farthest thing from a military leader can imagine in his physical self.
Yeah,
in place in that. And I think Biden, he's been in politics long enough that maybe he wasn't like born into it, but I think they put him in because he's just like been around for so long. So there is a kind of, they can't imagine anybody else in the position because they need someone who just like is kind of already part of it.
Yeah, they needed somebody that other people might believe could possibly still be in control. Right, someone who was recognized, was very recognizable. I mean, 50 years he's been in office, exactly. Almost as long as I've been alive.
Right,
it's he's like my entire life, and he obviously should have retired years ago for physical necessity. Yeah, he was picked because he was a face, right, a familiar face.
Right. But this is saying that a lot of our political class right now is very old, and they have been in
Yes.
in office for ages, and it's like we may not have the hereditary part down, but we certainly have this office for life thing down. That people,
Yeah. Although the Bushes gave it a good run.
Yeah. They keep trying. Well, and so
They do.
This is, I mean, this is not quite where I thought we were going to go tonight, but I think it's a good place, right? You're sort of meditating on the reality of political power and authority and sovereignty. I mean, the sort of fiction of popular sovereignty is, of course, hopefully gone out the window now, although we're still playing at elections, in the sense of the sovereignty of the political class exists only insofar as they go through with the practice of voting, rather than that there is a he's born into it, and so it's the accident of sex, right?
Yeah.
He has sex. Whoever his parents had sex, and so he's king, right?
Right. Sex
voting. Whereas now we have sort of popular performance voting. But
Yes.
either way is kind of mystical, right? It's like there's this sort of mystical reality of where power comes from. And that I have been thinking about that a lot in the last few years. It's like, what is sovereignty? Because we're watching it like with between Tucker and Putin. It's like there's this test of why does Putin have the kind of authority or ability to speak in these situations that he does? Why does Tucker have the sort of, it's a kind of celebrity space platform so that more people will listen to him because they know who he is, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe power. Maybe that's the perception, right? And maybe that perception needs to be maintained in order for the people who wield the actual power to actually use it. And that's part
definitely.
of it.
And again, I think this is still, again, in Chesterton, he's saying, like the difference between the people who actually hold the power and the people who you see, right? And Chesterton is quite clear that the people that you see are not the ones that have the actual power, and that's 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay,
I need to read that.
Yeah.
Now. I mean, I have read Chesterton. I haven't read that one yet. I will. That's amazing.
It's blowing my mind. All right, things that he says about hotels, but we're not going there. But the the power of, and there's sort of the layers of the power that Tucker's interview was on X. The interesting thing is, 2 weeks ago when we talked about this, it was at 200 million views. It's about at 209 million views. It hasn't changed much in the last 2 weeks. So it was like this explosion of interest. Everybody watched the first weekend, and then it's like the blockbuster movie, right? If you didn't see it in the first weekend, it's gone. It's like everybody forgets it. Yeah. It's over. It's like on to the next entertainment.
Well, have you, so right before we went on, I said there was something I noticed about the interview with Tucker and Putin on one of the clips that you have.
Okay. Is it the first one or the second one?
It's let's see.
So we have basically the beginning and the end, right? And we were just going to.
I wrote my little notes here. Trying to think. Let's see. So this would be in the 9-minute clip that you have at the 2 minute and 2 second mark.
Okay, so let's hold that thought. We have Silent Draco very helpfly said Henry V married daughter of mad French king, son Henry VI. Thank you. Yes. Who's the regent? Well, indeed. I mean, the word. The thing is, everybody watching the Tucker Putin interview, which was a lot of million people 2 weeks ago, now nobody. I mean, seriously, it's like it's been erased from my attention. I mean, there was end of term, there was the fire. I'm reading a lot of Bridgerton, so we're going to get to the alpha males for sure. We promise. But right now, we're going to watch these guys. That you had this 2 weeks ago. I had this incredible feeling of power from this interview, and now it's evaporated. I mean, I was rewatching it this evening to sort of get reminded, and it's like it's changed again. It's totally different again now.
Well, I looked at the clips that we're going to be looking at tonight because when we first watched, I was watching a lot and noticing a lot, but mostly I was listening to what was being said, and kind of blown away by the fact that they were doing this interview.
Right.
Now, when I paid attention to their body language, I was like blown away again. I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I miss that?
Oh, cool. Okay, so let's find out what's happening. Some of it's in what they say, and we did loads of backstory on Putin last week. So this is some of it is in their affect and actually this is I it's like, because we've been worrying about the sociosexual hierarchy and what the women do and such like that. So much of this happens at the level of bodies. It's like we've been talking about the king's two bodies and where the body is, and that we're so used to being in our heads with words, forgetting that human power is physical. It's power over other people's bodies to get them do things, to go to war, to work, medical, right? So if we're going to look at this and say, how does this interaction happen physically between the two of them, which was the first thing I noticed, and then we wiped over that last week. Last time we were talking about all sorts of other things, and now let's go back to, okay, so let's warm everybody up. I'll play the first clip, and I'll play the first clip through. Everybody watch it. It's about a minute, and then we can go back through and go, because I know how to repeat stuff now, I hope. Okay, so here we go. Play the first clip.
On February 22nd, 2022, you addressed your country in a nationwide address when the conflict in Ukraine started. And you said that you were acting because you had come to the conclusion that the United States, through NATO, might initiate a, quote, surprise attack on our country. And to American ears, that sounds paranoid. Tell us why you believe the United States might strike Russia out of the blue. How did you conclude that?
It's not that America, the United States, was going to launch a surprise strike on Russia. I didn't say that. Are we having a talk show or a serious conversation?
Here's the quote. Thank you. It's a formidable, serious talk.
Because your basic education is in history, as far as I understand.
Yes.
So if you don't mind, I will take only 30 seconds or 1 minute to give you a short reference to history for giving you a little historical background.
Please.
Let's look where our relationship with Ukraine started from. Where did Ukraine come from? The Russian state started gathering itself as a centralized statehood, and it is considered to be the year of the establishment of the Russian state in 862, when the townspeople of Novgorod invited a Varangian prince, Rurik, from Scandinavia to reign. In 1862, Russia celebrated the 1000th anniversary of its statehood. And in Novgorod, there is a memorial dedicated to the 1000th anniversary of the country. In 882, Rurik's successor, Prince Oleg, who was actually playing the role of regent at Rurik's younger son, because Rurik had died by that time, came to Kiev.
Okay, so the thoughts that we have from the opening. The thing that I noticed that I hadn't noticed before is Putin takes his watch off.
Yes, yeah,
right?
He does. And I looked at that, and it was I think it was confident, like getting ready to do something, because he was like rubbing his wrist, like it was almost like, okay, yes, let's get to this right here. And it's interesting that it was a watch that he took off, but it seemed to be bothering him, but it was almost like he wanted to be doing something with his hands, and so he quickly just took his watch off and put it down. It's just a strange thing to do. Like, he took the watch off to cover the fact that he was moving his hands too much.
Yeah, so that's to me. So like I have these bracelets, right? And I don't wear them when I'm writing, because obviously they'll bang into stuff when I'm writing, and I found myself taking them off in class. I usually wear them in class, and then I was like, okay, no. So you saw it as having something to do with his hands. I'm like, why take your watch off? right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
the opening thing is Tucker trying to set him up to, answer this question. He's like, is this serious or a talk show? And then he
Yeah,
starts
right.
taking his watch off. He's like, I'm here for the duration, right?
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was chomping at the bit. He wanted to get started. Yeah. It was enthusiasm. It wasn't nerves.
I don't think it was nerves at all, because there's no nerves.
No.
I mean, it's like, so if we start,
Mr. President, thank you.
okay, I can, you can't hear this, but pretend we can say,
No, I can't hear it.
okay.
Yeah.
So we have Mr. President, thank you. And then they're sitting there, right? And the first thing Tucker does is,
On February 20,
he's at this, on February, he's starting with the opening, like on February 24th, 2022, I'm, opening my, serious question, and I've got my semi-serious face on, right? So he's got his semi-serious face on to ask the question, which is, you addressed your country and da 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 da, and he's in his usual command mode of an interview at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he
22nd, 2022, you addressed your country in a nationwide address when the conflict in Ukraine started. And you said that you were acting because you had come to the conclusion that the United States, through NATO, might...
Right. So it's... Tucker's asking this question. He's like, you come to the conclusion the United States through NATO. It's at that moment that that Putin starts taking his watch off.
Yeah. As soon as he mentioned NATO.
Yeah.
Right. Like, oh yes, I want to talk about this.
Yeah.
Like, this is the meat of it. This is why we're here. Right. This topic right here.
The NATO topic.
This is, it's like the NATO topic. This was a negotiation. Right. But anyway, yeah.
And you had said that before. It's like, but he's like, I can feel myself wanting to. It's like, I'm going to take this off and put it on the table, and now I'm ready to fight.
Exactly.
Right?
Now I'm ready.
It's like,
yep, fisticuffs. Yeah.
You're not, and I'm going to put my bracelets back on because I'm wearing Wonder Woman bracelets and I need them. But there's that I hadn't noticed that before. But that's a really interesting move, because men don't just take their watches off.
No.
Yeah.
No, men's like, if I don't want to wear a watch, I won't put one on.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a woman wouldn't do that either. It's just an odd thing to do. Like, you make these choices of what you wear to present yourself before you show up.
Right.
So yeah, it was kind of a significant thing to notice that he was doing. So significant, you almost wonder, and I don't think it was though, but you could almost be forgiven for wondering if he did that on purpose, just as a theatrical device. But I don't think he did. It looked kind of natural. It looked like he was, just like you said, he was getting ready to fight.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, we talked about this last time, that all of it's theatrical.
Yeah, it is.
And it's the kind of theater. What we're trying to understand is this theater of the social interaction. That at this point, so he's taking his watch off and he's sort of sitting there calmly, and Tucker is still in his he's still mostly in command of. Tucker's going to lose this in about 3 seconds, right?
Exactly. I was just going to say that. Yeah, he's in command for the next few seconds, and then it's
over, right? And that I found. So he's in his official. That I'm also. I wondered how well we could do this and thinking about it, but one of the things that I know happens socially constantly is it's all improv, right? And I like that what we do on these streams is improv, and I like that it's in a conversation that we're having to quite literally take turns talking.
Yeah. Which
and when I'm trying to help my graduate students whom I'm training and teaching, I often recommend to them Keith Johnston's book on improv theater, right? Because there's all these exercises. Yeah, my husband suggested it to me 30 years ago, right? And that improv is a variety of things. One, it's storytelling, right? And Johnston has some nice tips on, if you're in an improv situation, how you can convince people that you've actually done it on purpose.
Oh.
The simplest
I meant to do that.
I meant to do that. No, the simplest way to give people the feeling of significance is reincorporation.
Okay.
You set something up, and you remember, so you can see, I do this all the time, right? You remember where you started, you bring it back in, and good storytelling is basically that, right? It's having set up something that then you reincorporate, and that in human cognition gives us this sense of meaning.
And completion, maybe, right? A complete story, right?
That you, but it's literally reincorporation. You need to, like, Genesis does this with Revelation. Revelation does this with Genesis, right? This sense of, there was this thing, you thought it was just part of the beginning, part of the story. It just, I mean, if Putin picks that watch up later, I'm going to be really happy. Now, that it seems to be the beginning, but you can train yourself to do this kind of pay attention to what you've set up previously, and if you bring it back in, it will create more of a sense of there was a point to the story. Reincorporation is giving things that were set up a point. Now, this is actually good advice for writing generally too. Like, make sure that all the stuff you set up previously gets brought back in, because people will notice it and then be upset when you haven't brought it back in, and they'll think, and they may not even be able to say why. They'll just feel like it's a hanging thing, and they'll want it reincorporated and brought back in.
It'll just annoy them, right?
So that's the first thing. The second thing so I'm always saying, bring stuff back in, set things up so that in your conversation things come back around, and you bring it all together, you tie it together. But if you want to teach, or improv theater, if you want to do things where there's actually like drama, you have to be willing to raise and lower status. And the most basic status shift is talking is high status, listening is low status.
Okay.
So
that makes sense. You're center stage.
So as a teacher, you have to be willing to switch to get the students to talk.
I can see that.
And alas, I can't use some of my tricks on you because you're not looking at me. If you're following my instructions, you're looking at your camera. One of the simplest one of the simplest ways to lower your status is to touch your face.
I really just had an itchy nose, I swear. That's all it was.
No, but I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at my camera, but I'm looking at you guys' audience, right? So if you're in a situation, you can touch your face. Now, all of these things are going to be happening subconsciously for people, unless you've trained yourself to be dealing with human beings in interactions like this. So news anchors like Tucker Carlson have practiced all of this stuff, right? Do not believe that anything he does is accidental, right? So we talked, I think we talked last time about how he's probably schooled to use like 5 different facial expressions, if that many. 4.
Yeah, actually, it was one of the people that was listening and commenting said, yes, that's what they teach you in journalism school. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. If you're listening, I hope you are. But yeah, I picked up on 3, and he said, they teach them 4 basic ones that they would repeat over and over. It's to get people to talk, right? And Putin apparently was already aware of this. And just cut him off immediately.
Rode right over all of his practiced, exercises. Yeah. So Tucker, I mean, he usually does, the concerns face and the smiley face and the this and the that. Yeah, none of it worked on Putin, hilariously.
No, in fact, he looked slightly irritated that he tried it on him, which I can understand. It'd be an insult considering how much experience he has. It's like, don't try that crap on me. I try that on other people. Don't try it on me.
Right. Well, and Putin's actually trained if he's trained as a lawyer, I don't know, we talked about this last time, whether he's trained as a trial lawyer, but lawyers also are given tips like this, right? How to perform in a...
Well, because they perform. Yeah. It's a performance. Yeah. You have to convince people, and you convince people like a stage actor does with their entire body.
Exactly. So improv, it will work for you. Class, it will work for you as teachers, and it works in all these other situations too. So I mean, in a dialogue, the main thing you want to make sure you're doing is trading back and forth, right, in the conversation. So there are ways that you can practice that, and also, I mean, I think to realize that letting yourself fall quiet is I just thought of this. It's challenging if you think you're meant to be in charge, because you have to let go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to have an unexpressed thought for a lot of people, myself included. Yeah.
But not that. I mean, it's literally like lower status in order to get the other people to, give them a chance. So you can recognize that this is, and I'm all like hyper conscious of what we're doing. It'll be. There's also an anxiety of keeping talking versus the way Putin's going to talk through this whole interview is like he just talks straight over Tucker, which is a massive power move. But has zero anxiety whatsoever. You can see it in his physical, in his body, right? Zero anxiety about being able to keep talking.
Right. I didn't see any anxiety. And if we get to it later, I did see exasperation. So he did have an exasperation tell.
Yeah.
Later in the second
okay.
clip. Yeah.
But we're seeing so that's, let's see. The storytelling techniques of reincorporation and bringing back in things to give significance, basic. The reality of a conversation being a status shifting back and forth, and then another thing that's actually important in this is the way Johnston describes certain kinds of exercises he has his actors do, where they shift status, like that you can actually create a dramatic situation where all that the actors are doing is in fact changing. Right. And he has some practice, or like going from you're playing low status to then gradually take over and play high status, and the other one have to lower. Right. And that understanding that the significance here is understanding that is audiences will recognize it. They may not recognize how it's happening, but we are horrifically hypersensitive to status interactions as human beings. That's all we do.
That's fascinating.
All the
it
time.
Is. Yeah, subconsciously.
Right.
Like even. I wanted to go back one point because it just popped into my head, and it'll pop right back out again if I don't tell you. But you're talking about, you said I'm going to die if he puts the watch on later to reincorporate that. Putin did reincorporate, so he gave a 20 to 30-minute lecture on Russian and Ukrainian history, and at the end of the 2-hour interview, he talked about Russians reconciling because they're all Russians. So he reincorporated that at the very end. Very practiced.
Very practiced.
Yeah.
So that, yes, exactly. That that delightful ending feels that way. And even Tucker had to say, "Yeah, we're done." I think that
because maybe he saw it.
He felt it. I mean, and the thing is, Tucker knew at that point there was nothing he could say. There was nothing more he could say, and he just said,
"Yeah, how do you top
we're
that?
done.
How do you top that?"
And it's exactly for that reason, because Putin had made his point, and that's what you could say. He'd made his point. He'd brought all of the things that he'd put together in, and condensed them into the Russian soul, right? And that's why it worked. But this sense of what Johnston has made practical in his actors training is human beings' sensitivity to status, and that he can do it with improv actors. That Johnston could do it with improv actors by telling them, to use these various techniques to raise and lower yourselves. That we've got to be picking up on this kind of stuff all the time. And if you are in a social situation where you felt like you've suddenly lost status, or you can't, I think you can you. Here's a good puzzle. Can you gain status accidentally, or do you have to seize it?
you can gain it accidentally. I think so. I mean, isn't that what a comedy of errors is about? Kind of people kind of fall into these crazy situations by accident. I'm trying to think of a better example in literature or film.
Well, you got to think in terms of bodies, right? And the real. I'm not sure, right? And having said that, it's like we think about authority and, commanding a room, right? So you can say, I mean, Tucker, Putin is in control of this after a minute and never lets go. And to understand why he's doing that, why he's able to do it when there's no bear in the room, there's no visible military, right? We're the representatives of sorts from two very powerful countries, but between the two of them, Tucker being in the situation of asking the questions that should give him a certain authority, but Putin wiped that out instantly.
Well, I think what Putin wiped out instantly was the tactic. I don't think he appreciated a tactic being used on him. I think it was. I think in hindsight, I think it was slightly insulting to try it. So are we going to have an interview here? Is this a talk show? Right.
That was insulting. Putin was insulting Tucker or Carlson.
Tucker was insulting Putin. I think Putin could have taken it as an insult that Tucker would try a tactic on him, because it implies that he could not have picked up on that and would have went, "Oh, let me just spill my guts to you like a talk show. Is this Oprah?"
Right.
Right. I mean, that was the response. I can see why you would be annoyed by that. It's a time waster and it insults his intelligence. He literally worked in intelligence, right? For decades. So, yeah.
Right, but I mean, in body language terms, Tucker is like calm in this opening moment, and he says
he's leaning forward in the opening moment. And okay, let's get into this, right?
Yeah.
And he lowers himself, but he stoops to conquer, right? Because it's a tactic, right? It's a body language tactic.
So, I mean, yes, he lowers himself a bit but Putin just sits back in his chair for the most part.
Right, taking up as much space as possible because I'm the king.
Yeah.
My territory.
So Tucker comes in on the attack. But he's still, I think at the opening, Tucker's still he's sitting straight more, right? He's actually still sitting up to a certain extent. And that's why I think the taking the watch thing off was just like, I am so relaxed here. Either that, or I'm going to be able to see how long we're taking, right? That Putin's actually in control of the time.
So that he couldn't look at his watch like that.
He set it on the desk, or in the table.
Yeah, he set it right. Yeah, he set it down next to it. It looked like a phone or something like that, but something else. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd say he's set it there so he can time himself.
Interesting. Well, I think I think the person in the earpiece would have told him everything he needed to hear about time. He would have told him. No, I think that was more, like I said, it could have been an act, but even if it wasn't, it meant the same thing. It meant, okay, let's get down to this right now. This is what we're here for. Right. Yeah. It's kind of like rolling up your sleeves.
Okay, so now we thinking about all of it, and there's more in the improv book. That's just the stuff I can remember, like as basic level. You need to know these things. That this kind of status jockeying is obviously usually happening regularly in a conversation, but since Putin wipes out Tucker in the first minute. It's over.
And Tucker knew it too, so he just backed right off. Because he's very professional. Professional as in he can tell what the person he's talking to is thinking. Which he's very good at directing an interview. He's
usually in control of it longer than a minute, right? And this one so here we go. So he's still asking his question, and Putin's taking his watch off. We'll go on a little bit further.
Initiate a quote. Surprise attack on our country.
Okay, the watch is coming off.
And to American ears, that sounds paranoid. Tell us why you believe the United States might strike Russia
And
out of the blue? How did you conclude that?
Wipe and sort of
Дело не в том,
sigh.
что Америка
It's not that America, the United
that's an
States,
affectation.
was
Yeah,
going to
and he
launch a
looks
surprise
down,
strike on
right?
Russia.
It's like,
I
you know.
didn't say that. Are we having a talk show or
Okay,
a
and here's
serious
Tucker.
conversation?
Tucker.
people,
Okay,
right?
yeah, this is Tucker at the moment when Putin says, "Are you having a talk? Were we having a talk show, serious conversation?" Tucker completely giggles. Right? This is we are less than a minute in,
totally.
and he's giggling.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah, that was really odd. Because he was giggling too high.
Mhm.
The voice was way too high, and it was too long. Right? Like he was trying to diffuse a situation, like with explosive laughter.
Yeah, I mean, I I'm holding this frame for a little bit. It's like he's over laughing. It's not
Yes.
that funny.
Yeah. Even if you're laughing at yourself, it's not that funny.
No, it's not that funny. Now
Right,
my
or-
face is itching
yeah.
and I'm scratching myself constantly. Okay, so he's
Here's
laugh,
the
laugh,
quote.
laugh, laugh, laugh. Here's the
Thank you.
quote. Thank you. And Putin's smiling, right? Tiger's like, thank you. This was maybe the thing is,
I'm sorry, I'm thinking Putin's smiling and he's thinking, you dick. Sorry.
I mean, he's like, I just beat.
That's not the way
It
to
doesn't
say
matter
it.
how long this goes on. Yeah, I won. Right.
Yeah.
And that it's like this sort of, you want the samurai battle to go on a little longer. It's literally less than a minute.
No, the samurai cut his head off like immediately. So-
And
now he's just monologuing.
yeah, and Putin's like, I can say whatever I want for as long as I want now.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so then there was like, why was Putin able to do that so quickly?
Because he knew what Tucker was doing. Yeah, he just cut him off. He wasn't going to be handled.
So, but this is like the deep down, it's like men the world over, particularly in our little corner of the internet, are constantly wanting to have authority over women. Well, right?
Yeah.
How do you? And this going back to, it's like, if you're king, you're born to it. Okay, fine. If you're president, you're elected to it. Whatever, right? How in the like practical level of real social interactions where you have to command a room, you have to command a country, you have to command a meeting, even an interview, right? I mean, I'm still delighting at how refreshing it is seeing a man take control of this somewhat ridiculous situation and make it dignified, right?
Yeah. Well, most people aren't in situations where something like that could happen, right? Because I mean, they weren't equals meeting. I mean, this is the president of Russia, and you're very famous and very good at your job, but you're still just a journalist, right? You're just somebody who asks very important people questions. You've become very important yourself along the way, but not president of Russia important. So there was an unequal social. There was an unequal social status there to begin with. And it was a recognized unequal social status. Nobody was fighting for anything. They both recognized who they were and who had more authority there. So it was easier for Putin to do that than it would be for anybody in even a corporate boardroom to do that, with few exceptions, obviously. Somebody comes into Elon Musk's meeting and calls him a name and says he's ridiculous, he'll be gone by the end of the hour, because he can. But that's not most places. So
well, okay, but you're saying so Tucker, Carlson. We can't even call him by his last name because Tucker seems to be more his name, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Come on, one name celebrity.
But journalists in the United States seem to rule our country. Right?
They'd like
yes,
to think
they do. I mean, the coverage they were giving yesterday Trump may not be president now, but he was president, and Biden's only been president one term, so they're basically equals. Right? And the press, our press, seems to have zero respect for. I mean, it's like our press seems to typically pretend that they're the ones that decide who we show respect to?
That's because I think they could decide elections as well. I mean, I think they've actually said that. They're the ones who should be telling people who to vote for.
Yes, they have said that.
And how to vote. So they actually do think they choose the leaders. The fourth estate is alive and well in the minds of the people who run these news organizations. Gotta find a better word than news. It's not really news. It really is propaganda.
Yes, it is.
And people don't like.
Well, it's news, and the propaganda level of the news is it's all new, right? No, it's not. It's on repeat.
Right, it's repeat, but it's also selective reporting. Right. This is no different than what the Soviet Union was doing when they were in direct control of all the newspapers. Well, how is it any different? Right. Oh, well, we don't have a dictator doing it, but you're dictating to me, so you're my dictator. Yeah, but I mean it for good.
Yeah, so did Pravda, right?
And you can say with this, yeah, exactly. Pravda means truth, right? So it's in the name. So they thought very highly of themselves as well, right? So yeah, we have to come up with a better word. Wouldn't be news because it's not new. Like you said, it's on repeat.
Right, but just I'm going to keep pushing you back on it's like that. Interestingly, in our country, the press, I mean, this is, of course, why Trump drives them nuts, because he won't let them do that. Right?
Right.
It's like,
right. He's not playing nice. Right.
Now I'm trying to think, how did our press get so powerful? Because as you're rightly pointing out, right, they're both playing the propaganda game. The United States has been playing the propaganda game just as much as the Soviet Union ever did.
Of course.
And
I don't think it's worse now than it was in the 1950s. I think it's probably the same.
In terms of our propaganda versus theirs, or the level?
Yes,
yeah.
Ours. Yeah.
Well, again, so Chesterton, who will be our marker for all of this, is saying, I mean, the first thing that happens when the ship docks when he arrives is the journalists show up, right? And he has some meditation on, these poor journalists. They're these mild men asking questions, and it's the headline writers that get them into trouble. Because the headliner,
well, the New York Post
and Chesterton is reflecting on it's like how the headline writers make out either he says they're translating for him because there were questions like about the prohibition, right? And he says, there's no such thing as prohibition. It's just the rich, right? Because the rich kept drinking, and they're just trying to control the poor by making it illegal for them to drink.
Yep.
That the headline writers will translate that into something like Chesterton says prohibition is all about the dollar, and he says I wouldn't talk about dollars, but it's in the headliners' interest to make it all adversarial and binary, obviously.
Right. So it's what the subject Chesterton says. It's what the journalist writes about what Chesterton says, and then it's about what the editor runs as a headline about what the journalist wrote about what Chesterton says. So there's three people communicating three different things here
at three different levels of and Tucker in his interviewing with people in our country, he's usually in control of those interviews.
Yeah, because people want to be interviewed by him, right? Because he has a large reach.
And our press, as you say, it's like our press. So I think Chesterton. Is this a Chestertonian thing too? No, it was something else I was reading. That sort of like which generation warfare we're in. That we are still in this situation of the press gets to shame people for doing things that they would presumably not want to be doing, right? So we're still in the Vietnam era of, how many more babies do you want to kill? Warfare.
Right. Yeah.
And our press is used to being able to, there was some interviewer from the UK, I think, said something to Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday, and Marjorie, instead of being polite or using it as some people were suggesting, she should have just said, not politely, right? Go away. That our press is used to being able to shame people into stuff, and that's their major dramatic goal, right? Let's talk about status shiftings, right? I come in, ask you a question, even though I'm low status, I can own you with my gotcha question, and therefore I, as Rachel Maddow or whatever, have high status over you because I've shamed you.
Okay, so it's a power play on the part of the interviewer. Right. That's what you're saying. Okay. I guess I credit him with more brains than that.
Tucker? No, I don't think Tucker was trying to shame Putin. I'm saying that.
No, but the power play. I think you're saying he might have been trying a power play with him to control the interview.
No, I'm saying I think Tucker was trying to have a real conversation with Putin, but his default is, I mean, he opens with, you said you were acting because you come to the conclusion that the United States through NATO might initiate a, quote, surprise attack on our country. And to American ears, that sounds paranoid, right? So his opening thing is, that sounds crazy. How do you answer?
Yeah, and I mean, when I heard that, I thought, I don't think that sounds paranoid because I know something of the history of that area. And I mean, something just like minimum, you wouldn't have to know much to realize they have every reason and right to be worried about NATO expansion right on their border.
Right.
But
that opening phrasing was, that sounds paranoid.
Yeah, you're right. It's bad phrasing. Yeah, that sounds paranoid to American ears. That sounds paranoid. It's like, you don't speak for me.
Right. And then Putin simply refused the move, right? He just, like, instead of saying, I'm not here to, well, actually, I mean, that's what's interesting about the whole thing is, God, my face is so itchy. This is so funny.
Mine too.
That
Colin.
The watching Putin talk calmly for 2 hours proves he's not crazy. So the setup question was, are you crazy, Putin? No.
Are you? Yeah.
Right.
Are you paranoid?
I'm taking my watch off. Right. Are we here for a real conversation? And then there's Tucker giggling. And here we'll play this. Here's Putin like grinning at us while we've been talking now.
It's a formidable series.
Да, это серьезный разговор.
Okay, and so Putin says, okay, it's serious.
Basic education is in history, as far as I understand.
And then your education is in history. I'm going to give this. It's wow. If we could learn how to deal with our own press that effectively, yes.
Trump does. That's why they hate him. Yeah, because he doesn't care how he looks to them.
Right. Well, that's very high status, right? You are not accepting the terms that the other people in the room are dictating about what looks good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, a lot of that had to do with the fact that he didn't have to ask anybody for money. He didn't have to play nice.
That Trump didn't. Yes.
Correct. Right. Which is probably a large reason why they're trying to take all of his money off of him right now.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's the only way to defang him, right?
So now there's a question. It's like, is one, and I'm so itchy. This is so funny. Is one able to, you'd say, Putin can play very high status here because he has all of this power behind him of of Russia. Although Russia is, it's a very powerful country, but it's still smaller than the United States in terms of population.
I don't think it was just because he had the power of the state behind him. I think there's a reason Putin is where he is today, and it's because he is an alpha, right? He's a classic alpha male. He's also very experienced.
Right. We're trying to deconstruct what alpha means.
Right.
Rather than just say he is an alpha. Yes. Right. Why? What does that mean?
That's the evidence. He's there because of that, right? That's just kind of some evidence that he is. What does it mean? It means not being afraid to speak your mind and to take control of a situation and to exert. So power isn't the right word. to exert the appropriate amount of, in this case, intellectual force when you're having a discussion with somebody, right? To not just stand your ground, but to actually take a step forward and take your watch off and go, all right, you mentioned NATO, let's go there, right? And not kind of cower and say, oh, well, him and Han, well, you see, this is what, no, here's what it is. Let's just talk about this right now. Right? It's not backing down when somebody tries to make you back up. Metaphorically, it's grabbing the tip of the spear when somebody sticks it in your face. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, I don't care if it hurts me. Let's get that out of the way right now. That's an alpha. Having that impulse to actually put yourself and your of right and wrong and your own ideas, what you want to say forward. Without regard to any blowback you might get. It's courage, just to put it simply. It's having courage, number one, because that's not something everybody's born with. Some people are, and some people earn it, and some people do both, right? Some people put themselves in situations where they can cultivate the courage they were born with.
Right.
I think that's probably him.
And the thing is, I think so you said a lot of things there, that he is, it's intellectual. I'd say the most powerful thing he did is, like, Tucker giggled and he just sat there. And that was before any kind of informational exchange had happened. It was all emotional discipline. Yeah.
Disciplined, self-disciplined, very good phrasing, yes. Yeah.
And from my own experience, I say, if you have the intellectual background if you have like the background in your head of the thing that you're going to need to talk about, that does give you calmness because you're not threatened by the questions that are coming at you.
It does, but some people are still afraid of the exchange.
Okay.
And that's personality. Right? Some people don't like any kind of confrontation. They know they're right, but they're going to keep quiet anyway because it makes them too uncomfortable to speak and to press their own ideas.
And that is actually what the situation that most people find themselves in these days, because that's how we interact online a lot. But also, I mean, the thing is, this is a one-on-one conversation, and so pressing your ideas back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure you've done this in academia for years. You've had to. I used to occasionally see my professors argue with each other, and I always thought it was kind of amusing when one of them had more information than the other. It was great. But they were all, the people that were doing this were, for the most part, they were just talking to peers, so it was easy with them. But on one occasion, it was a visiting professor, and it was in a lecture hall, and she was a guest in a debate about feudalism. And she had some very strong ideas about it. And my professor was a little taken aback at the strength with which she was exerting, herself to get these ideas out and to correct him and tell him, no, you're wrong. Here's why you're wrong. It was kind of like really surprised at how forceful she was, right? She wasn't mean, she was just forceful. And it was kind of surprising because it's like, well, we're just talking about history here, right? Who argues about that? My naive 20-year-old self thought at the time.
Was it Peggy Brown, was it? She's our great scholar of feudalism.
I don't know. She was English, actually.
It's quite forceful.
She was a visiting scholar from somewhere in England.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I don't remember her name. But I think most people might see this, if most people aren't in academia, but they might be in corporate world, and they might see this in corporate meetings where people are arguing what should be done and what shouldn't be done. That happens a lot, and most people will clam right up because they don't like confrontation, because it's always going to be one person in the room that's going to just be a big bully.
Right. And
it'll just walk all over them, and it takes somebody else to stand up to them, but it's never comfortable, right? Putin's the kind of person, I think, who's comfortable with confrontation.
Yes. Yes, and that's
And
what we saw
that's
when we saw in this. And Tucker, I mean, that he giggled so quickly out of it.
Yeah.
This, I find this interesting, that the sort of training in debate, right? But this isn't really debate, right? And Putin wanted to say this: "Are we having a serious conversation? I'm not going to just be a performance seal for you. I'm going to give you the information that you asked for." And to be able to, like, the primary thing, to be able to just say that calmly is hugely powerful.
Yes, it was, and that's what an alpha would do, right? I'm not bothered by your, frankly, girlish giggling.
Yeah.
You're leaning forward. Any of your tricks you're going to try. In fact, I'm mildly irritated by it, so I'm just going to cut you off right now, and let's get down to this. Why we're really here.
Right.
He's not afraid to confront him on it calmly, and I think that's very much an alpha. That's very much an alpha trait, I think, and that's probably why he rose as high as he did.
See, the open question whether or not people can learn to do this kind of thing, or whether they have the propensity to be able to learn it.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
Right. So having the ability to learn it means you have the personality that's not afraid of confrontation. Right. Plenty of people can engage in confrontation. They don't necessarily like it. They're not comfortable with it. Being comfortable with confrontation, or even and doing it well in a way that gets what you want without rattling people or derailing a whole conversation or a whole meeting or a whole seminar, to be able to do that is a skill. It's a skill that you learn through experience, but you have to have the right personality to be able to do it. That's the only way you can get the experience. So it's a bit of both. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, this is always our chicken and egg question in academia and life, right? And then saying he's an alpha because he practiced these skills, or it's like we have our accidental czar guy telling us that that he's it just happened
it's
to
an
him.
Accident. No, nothing
Right.
well. Yeah, that book was that book's ridiculous.
It was still a good test, right?
Yeah, it's he had ambition. If I'm to strip down that book you just showed just to the facts without all of the attitude that surrounded it, the way he wrote it. A young guy has ambition, very young, works hard, starts low, works his way up. Good story, right? Means he had ambition, but he also had good self-discipline, and he took these lower jobs and worked his way up.
Right.
And somebody obviously recognized the talent, right? So, but the impetus was there already to do these things because of the personality. Never mind, let alone when he was young. He's much older than me, but that's just my guess based on what I saw in the interview. Yeah.
Well, we're still in the potential context of how. My meta question is like, what leadership consists of. What we're in the world now where I spend a lot of time thinking it's like what happened to all the men. And what happened to, we're all worrying about what happened to our country, what happened to our civilization. The ability to have this kind of calm conversation at length. It's certainly not fostered. That's why is this a talk show or is it a serious conversation? It's not fostered in our entertainment world of politics.
Right. Yeah, that's an infotainment, right? What they used to call it. It's it's like women's magazines, right? They have to be entertaining, and they have to be manipulative and propaganda-like.
Wait, are we going to blame this all on the women getting the right to vote? We could. I mean, and Chesterton, he makes this little phrase. He said, you know, one of the things that he wanted to have in his, I think he did do a piece on this, saying how women's suffrage decreases women's power. We need to look this up and find out.
Yeah,
where he is.
I don't think so.
Well, you said at the beginning, it's like you were just discouraged with the women in the now women being about women in power versus, or being about particular. We need
Right.
Our meta goal here always. I think doing the distaff side of the social sexual hierarchy, doing the distaff side of what is culture, what is civilization, which is our problem, and what kind of complementarities but differences we have between women in authority and men in authority. And I do think it is fascinating to me that the like what our Western media seems to think is the most damning thing they can say about Putin is that he's behaving in a masculine way. Even though, as we proved last week, a lot of the stuff that's happening is literally mirrored in our own situation.
Right. Well, that's part of the propaganda. Yeah. That's part of the we're going to control the masses, which are ruled by women and mostly women watching, because we're what did now used to call us the 51% minority, right, something like that. Right, we're not a minority of people who buy women's magazines and watch infotainment shows and news shows. We like to talk. We like to hear people talk. We're here talking right now about, right? So we do like to do it. So they're playing to who they think their audience is. They're playing to the women who are been told they need to be terrified of strong men, right? They need to be terrified of these alphas, and they need to be terrified of decisiveness, because they're trying to take your power away. I don't even know what that means.
This is a good. Okay, so we have enough time, I think, to work through layers of some of what happens in this second clip. But that's it. It's like, what are we meant to be afraid of here? Okay, so I'm gonna start playing the second clip. And we have 9 minutes of it, and maybe we need to go through all of it or not. I don't think I don't want to play the whole thing through, but you said get to about 2 minutes.
I'm dying to get you the two minute mark.
Okay, so let's so this is at the end, and if you haven't watched the full video yet, we can't help you, because there's a lot they talked about, a lot, and they've gotten to the end where Tucker's asked him about the journalist that is in prison in Russia right now for, as Putin says, spying. And Tucker's going to try to get him to say, you know, won't you come to talk? Okay, so I'll play it up to the point where you said to. Well, that's 2 minutes in, but okay. Watch.
2 minutes 20 seconds.
2 minutes 20. Watch for the next 2 minutes and 20 seconds. All of the things that these guys are going through.
Mr. President, thank you.
I also want him to return to his homeland at last. I'm absolutely sincere. But let me say once again, the dialogue continues. The more public we render things of this nature, the more difficult it becomes to resolve them. Everything has to be done in calm manner.
I wonder if that's true with the war, though. Also, I mean, I want to ask one more question, which is, and maybe you don't want to say so for strategic reasons, but are you worried that what's happening in Ukraine could lead to something much larger and much more horrible? And how motivated are you just to call the U.S. government and say, let's come to terms?
I already said that we did not refuse to talk. We're willing to negotiate. It is the Western side, and Ukraine is obviously a satellite state of the U.S. It is evident. I do not want you to take it as if I'm looking for a strong word or an insult, but we both understand what is happening.
Финансовая поддержка, сколько? 72 миллиарда.
The financial support, 72 billion US dollars, was provided. Germany ranks second, then other European countries come.
Огромный поток идет.
Dozens of billions of US dollars are going
course,
to
yeah.
Ukraine.
Конечно, поэтому,
There's a huge influx of
ну,
weapons.
скажите,
In this case, you should tell the current Ukrainian leadership to stop and come to negotiating table, rescind this absurd decree.
переговаривайтесь.
We did not
Лучше не
refuse.
отказались.
Sure, but you already said it. I didn't think you meant it as an insult because you already said correctly, it's been reported that Ukraine was prevented from negotiating a peace settlement by the former British Prime Minister acting on behalf of the Biden administration. So of course they're a satellite. Big countries control small countries. That's not new. And that's why I asked about dealing directly with the Biden administration, which is making these decisions, not President Zelensky of Ukraine.
Ну, если администрация Зеленского на Украине.
Okay, so he asked him, why don't you phone up Washington, I guess? Why don't you talk to the Biden administration? I'm at 2:20. What did you see?
Okay, so at about the 2-minute, 2-second mark, Tucker gestures to himself with an open hand like this.
Oh, I went
he's
past it a
saying-
little bit. Okay, so let me go back. Two
Okay.
minute, 2-second. Oh, okay,
Yeah,
I went
we're
too
down
far.
2.02.
Okay, let me go back. All right, so here we go. You're saying Tucker's got his hands out.
And he gestures to himself with an open hand.
A peace settlement by the former British Prime Minister acting on behalf of the Biden.
Well, he does this, right? He goes like that.
Yes. As he's saying, acting on behalf of the Biden administration. To me, that's a tell that he's actually there acting on behalf of the Biden administration. I was like, oh no.
No, you're
How did I
reading
miss
deep
that?
into these gestures now. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that was it. that was just evidence of my theory that this was not an interview. This was an official negotiation. Acting on behalf of the Biden administration.
As
and he's
me,
lowering his head.
as myself.
Yes. Yes.
But I mean,
Thank you.
I mean that's interesting as a premise because I mean, isn't Tucker's whole point to be at least Republican in party?
Well, it didn't matter what party he's in. I think he was there on a mission. I think he was there on a literal mission.
Well, the thing we talked last time about how it is really important that's on X.
Okay, so I said I think he's there on a mission. 2 weeks later, Victoria Nuland is gone.
That's true. That is.
Zelensky's generals are defecting.
Ah, yes. Tell more about this. You were thinking about this before.
And Zelensky himself looks like he has just met death.
Yeah, in that
Right, the Grim Reaper.
a press conference where he and the Greek consul, who's the official from Greece, they're talking. They're standing at podium talking, and
Yeah.
Russia doesn't care who they bomb, and it's like, seriously, you just said that out loud?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, he's saying anything.
Yeah.
He's throwing anything at the wall to see what'll stick.
Right.
At this point, which is it's desperation. He's gnawing off his own hand to get out of the trap at this point, his own paw, right? So yeah,
No, you're right. So
when-
I started at the beginning of. See how I'll reincorporate what I set us up with. It's
Yes.
like it's been so long. It's been 2 whole weeks. Oh wait, that's nothing,
Yeah.
right? But 2 weeks later,
right. Yeah, he shifts in this. Okay. So what did I? Well, my little post-it notes down here right before we get here. Right. So starting at 7 minutes 33 seconds thereabouts, the mark of say the story of the Russian-speaking Ukrainian soldiers identifying as Russian. He brings that up, and okay. So as he's talking about this, let's see, at the 9-minute mark, says no one will be able to separate the soul. Right. For a few seconds, for a few minutes before that, he'd be shifting in his seat a little bit. He was moving his feet like he was dancing a little bit. And Tucker was doing the same thing. That might have just been mirroring each other, right?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get to by the end, and I've got both of them on screen right now.
Right.
Never mind what Tucker was doing at the beginning, right? By the end, it's straight up mirroring. Yeah.
Yes, it is, except right at the very end, when Putin's explanation ends, he shifts in his seat and he asks, shall we end here? Is there anything else? Right. But at this point, he is completely stalled.
You want to play this end? So I've got it at 8:50. I'll play this very end now.
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brings together our souls. No one will be able to separate the soul. Shall we end here, or is there anything else?
No, I think that's great.
Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, by that
Let
point,
him out.
I should stop. By that point, Tucker's got his knees together, and he's. I mean, that's such a girly position, right?
It's a submissive position.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That
Right.
Putin is. I mean, you see, he twiddled his feet a little bit. Is that what you meant?
He did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they were both doing that a little bit, but starting at 7:33, he started speaking about the Russian-speaking Ukrainian soldiers identifying as Russian.
Right.
Right, and then he was ending off talking about, and he was shifting in his seat a little bit there, but when he starts to talk about the soul, he gets very still.
We should watch that
Like
part
it's
again. So
very, very still, and then he only shifts one last time to say, "Okay, are we done now?" But when he's talking about that, he's very, very serious.
that's the soul part. Here we go.
The unity is still there.
Воссоединение произойдет. Оно никуда не делось.
Why are the Ukrainian authorities dismantling the Ukrainian Orthodox Church?
Русскую православную церковь.
Because it brings together not only the territory, it brings together our souls. No one will be able to separate the soul. Shall we end here, or is there anything else?
No, I think that's great.
Спасибо.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hope you let him out.
Yeah, that's a really. It's so curious how we had the beginning and the end, right? And the beginning with Tucker trying to ask the question and then giggling, and by the end he's just. I mean, that ending was so riveting.
Poignant.
Yeah, and poignant. It was stunning how you're right, how calm, I mean, just how still and that. Okay, so of the improv theater suggestions, when touch your face and it lowers your status, keep your head still raises your status, which is what they train the news anchors to do.
Okay.
Right, it's like you see broadcast news, a lot of this is like demonstrated in that when he's training him how to be an anchor. And you know, and not everybody can do it, right? It is acting, and broadcast news is playing off that. It's definitely acting, but when you can do it well, which again, not everybody can do, and maybe not everybody can be trained to do it. It's hard to say. The ones that can be trained to do it are really, really good at it, which is why they get millions of dollars to do it.
Yeah, again, that's well, there is such a thing as screen presence, right? And personality, and that's back to what we were discussing. Is an alpha made or born, right? Both, right? You have to have the aptitude.
But this is what I'm curious about, and why I wanted to do this sort of like fine level breakdown of their interactions is we're in this chaos of influences and effects, and wanting people to be able to attend at these fine-grained levels to, in fact, how the interaction has the force that it does for the people involved. We started with the claim that everybody actually always knows that these things are happening, but they may not be able to articulate why it worked.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's like Putin reincorporating a bit of the history of Russia at the very end. I didn't pick it up until today, and I had watched the whole interview. I'd read the transcript a couple of times. I watched the clips we had, and then I was like, "Oh, he did do that." Until you started talking about it, how you start and end a story to draw the reader in and keep their interest and hold their interest and make them feel like they got something at the end of it, that they're not missing anything. This is, you have to reincorporate. Oh, wait, well, he did that. He reincorporated. So subtle, I didn't even pick up on it until you mentioned it.
Yeah, this is unfortunately, once you've trained yourself to be paying attention to these things, the thing is, it works at several levels. Like, it's like we are getting much better in our poetry writing at verbal effects, right? And it can go either way. It's like you can see these things being done clumsily, and then you're just frustrated. Or once you get very practiced at being able to achieve them, you like intensely appreciate how well masters at it do it. And that is what, my sense watching the interview, and again, I mean, still bears repeating, right? The watching it again, it's still that powerful, right? That Putin is still that much in control of the discussion.
Yes.
To say somewhat with what he says, right? Some of the content matters, but there's also all of these other layers of affect and emotion and self-discipline and, we probably could break it down to even finer levels of, voice level and things like that. That when you can see it doing, you can see someone who's a master at it, and if you are sufficiently well trained in attending to it, it's just breathtaking, right? It's like chess masters watching something that nobody else understands what just happened.
Yeah.
Which is why I said it was like fencing, because it's like these invisible moves that you don't know why they worked, but man, did they work.
Yeah. And improv is like that too, right? Really good improv. When people are doing it, they'll say, "Oh, that thing you did right there," right? And they'll like, "What thing was that?" I don't remember it, because what was working was the stream of consciousness. So it was like at the subconscious level that they were actually crafting a story like on the fly.
Right.
But it worked really well.
Yeah, there's other layers of techniques, one of which is accepting offers, right? It's like if you say something and I take it and I work with it, this thing moves along. If what people, tend to think they are supposed to be doing when they're in a discussion is blocking, and then nothing happens, right? No, that's not it. No, right? Bang, 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 bang. Whereas the yes and is the effective movement of a scene.
Right. Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah. But I mean, what's lovely and interesting, which we have learned in our own writing, is if you learn to do that, then inspiration comes as well, right? That there's an actual possibility of learning from the exchange. I mean, Tucker seems to learn some stuff from Putin. I'm doubting Putin learned stuff, but it is possible that in the pressure of the interview and the improv, Putin found himself able to say things that he hadn't thought of before, which maybe is what happens at that very end, right? He just brought that in so beautifully, and it felt very unrehearsed. Maybe he said that a gazillion times. Maybe it was like that moment that he'd used that example. But that was a really lovely tie-in of all of the things they've been talking about. It was.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I hope it does end soon, for the sake of all the people that keep dying there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what we pray for in the context of the Mosaic Ark is men learning to do this better again. Not as,
Or women
let it. Yeah, well, the men need to learn how to do it again, and that this level of conversation actually becomes a possibility again, so that it's no longer simply the what you were saying earlier, the emotional trigger propaganda that we're used to in our media now.
The manipulation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no real discussion, no real conversation, no real negotiation ever, because it's always got to be somebody, controlling somebody with an iron fist, including in just even in an interview.
Right.
Right.
Or actually with ridicule and shame, which I think Putin didn't really I mean, Tucker kind of embarrassed himself with a giggle, but most of the time,
he's never going to let that down.
No, he's not. Most of the time, Putin was just saying, "I'm just talking," and he wasn't trying to. I mean, the sort of you were in the CIA. It's probably good they didn't take you. Was a bit of a, little thing there, but most of the time it was pretty mild and as insults. I mean, incredibly mild. It was.
Yeah.
I could go further, but I'm not going to. Yeah. We would like to see more of this level of men's interaction. That's what these ladies are telling you guys. Please. Yes, we're tired of the drama and the girly screeching. And we do say that as women, and we know what it's like. Trust us.
Yes, we know what we're like.
We know what we're like. and we'd like some contrast in our visual and audio world.
Yes, that would be refreshing.
Yes. Okay. Well, we've had a very private chat today. I'm taking everyone's exhausted from the Super Tuesday and the conversation. Yeah, so we don't have any burning questions right now, but we hope that those of you who are watching on YouTube, give us comments, like and subscribe. Subscribe to Unauthorized TV, which the new platform is being set up. It's all going to be brilliant and streamy, and we'll be able to have even better chats. So please subscribe to Logos and History, or Logos and Tolkien. However, my subscription on Unauthorized helps support our art so that we can bring you, well, most proximately Act 2. We have finished drafting Act 2 today. Great celebration. And, our artist is going to start working on the illustrations. Watch this space. Art always takes longer than it feels like it ought to, but it's worth it.
Totally worth it.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for supporting us. And we will be back next week with yet more on probably romance novels. That
Every man
ran away. No, men, if you want to know what women like, because you want to have us pay attention to you, we're here to help.
Take notes.
Take notes. Thanks for joining us. Good night.